Anton, take it away. Hi everyone, welcome to our talk on making pull requests great again. My name is Anton, and I've been a software developer at FreshBooks for over 5 years now.
And my name is Nan, and I've actually been working at FreshBooks for quite a bit of time. I did 2 quarters, and now I'm working full time for about a year.
You actually came back, so that's pretty cool. So, not everyone knows what a pull request is. So, it is definitely not this over here. What it is a pull request is a way to let people know what changes you want to make to a project. So, for example, suppose your company is working on an app that creates beautiful invoices like FreshBooks. Now, one day your project manager comes running in and asks you that they want to add Comic Sans to the application and make it more beautiful. As a developer, here's what would happen. First, I take the main code that everybody's working on, and I create a feature branch from that. With a feature branch, I can make all my changes, and when I'm ready, I go to GitHub, and I publish my changes with what's called the pull request. With a pull request, anyone who can access the link can actually see every single change that I've made. Things like, if I deleted or added a file, what lines of code I changed, all the spaces changes I've made, and even differences between images. So once the pull request is up and people are looking at it, they can actually start discussion on the little bits that changed, they didn't like it all, and then they can make comments like, maybe I put the CSS in a weird location, or maybe there's a typo in my code that prevents people from getting Comic Sans. And as the author, I can make additional changes based on these feedbacks. So once I have enough approval from my colleagues, I just merge my PR, my change is now part of the code, and now everybody gets Comic Sans. So why do we love pull requests so much? Well, when we first started using pull requests at FreshBooks, I was actually terrified of being, exposed as a shitty developer. I thought that everyone could now see exactly what I was doing and kind of see the horrible hacks I was going to put in to get the code working. But you know what? These fears turned out to be unfounded because my colleagues turned out to be surprisingly supportive and very helpful with everything I was doing. Thanks to the constant feedback and their hammering of the comments for over 5 years, I actually grew as a developer. So now that I'm an old fart in the company, I kind of see how beneficial it's been for my career. So I actually make it as part of my duty to kind of impart that knowledge to the rest of my colleagues and help them to improve their skills and their careers.
So for me, FreshBooks is my first full-time job, and it's a huge step up from what I've been doing at previous co-ops. So long gone are those days where I've been working solo on a project, committing straight to master after 2 weeks of work. Now I work in a learning community where we help each other grow and try to improve each other's skills. Pull requests have taught me everything I've known, from the small lint fixes to the big technical decisions. I find it a great medium for developers to learn and hone their skills. And I honestly believe that we become the best by learning from the best.
So why do we want to make pull requests great again? Well, back in 2011, when I first joined FreshBooks, there were only about 13 developers there. So within a day, we'd only get about 8 to 10 pull requests. And it was easy to kind of sit through it within an hour, look at every single one, make a comment, and then that's it. Fast forward 5 years later, and we have over 50 developers, putting up over 100 pull requests every single day. As FreshBooks grows, the problem is going to get worse and worse. And just the two of us simply can't keep up with this flood of pull requests that are coming in constantly. So that's why I want to give this talk, to kind of share with you some of the ways that we've actually learned to kind of improve pull requests, both from an author's perspective and also a reviewer perspective. So reading pull requests doesn't have to be a horrible chore. I actually find reading them quite enjoyable. If people put more effort into how they're presented, reviewing them will go from this over here to something like this. So first step in improving your pull request, give a great title. Unfortunately, people will judge a book by its title. And you all know the movie Home Alone, right? Did you know that the Spanish-speaking translation is actually, and my Spanish is horrible, I'm very sorry, it's called Mi Pobre Angelito. I don't know if I said it right, but it translates to My Poor Little Angel. So if you walk into dirt one day and you had to choose between Home Alone or My Poor Little Angel, which one would you choose? And give a great title. Here's some of the pull requests we've actually had at FreshBooks. The one at the very bottom, all it has is just purely the ticket numbers, which is bullshit. Because these ticket numbers are for robots only. Humans have no idea what it means. So if I'm short on time, I'm looking through a whole list of them, I see this one, I'm not gonna care. The second one over there is a little bit better. It has like a brief description of what they're trying to change, but there's still a stupid little ticket number that I really don't care about and just provides noise to list of pull requests. The top one is my favorite because there's nothing about tickets at all, and it's purely about the short change they want to make. It kind of piques my interest enough that I just want to, I think to myself, oh, I have expertise like this. Maybe I can jump in and give my valuable opinion. So another way is to actually, you can use tags in your title as well to kind of help set expectations over what sort of feedback you want. If you put something up with like a WIP, which stands for work in progress, it lets people know that you kind of want feedback on the approach you're taking. That way people will know to ignore like small little nitty-gritty things like, link fixes or variable name changes. Sometimes I like to use RFC, when I'm doing investigatory work, and I just want my comments on my multiple approaches. And sometimes on a larger repo, I just use the specific feature or project name that I'm adding because it allows people to easily filter through the titles and decide which PRs they want to read or skip. So after you have your great title, you need a great description for people who've chosen to look at your PR. So I found this trending topic on Twitter a while back called poorly described titles. The first one is, a billionaire devotes his fortune to his cosplay and beating up the mentally ill. Does anyone know what movie this is?
Batman.
You're right, that is The Dark Knight. The second one, a lot of people take the ice bucket challenge. It doesn't end well. Titanic, you got it. Deadbeat dad tries to get his son to take over the family business.
Star Wars.
You got it, Star Wars. Last one, the series of naps. Inception. So let me show you a PR with a great description. So this one over here, first of all, they're clearly stating what kind of problem they solve. So automatically jump in and you know what kind of approaches might be wrong, what might be right. They have a clear description of how they're trying to solve this. And even better, they actually have a little picture over there that kind of shows the change. Because I don't know about you, but I find it very, very difficult to actually parse CSS in my head. If you're making a change to UI, actually have a before and after so that people can actually see the changes. And finally, if you have a complicated workflow, make sure you include like a GIF that shows you the workflow so that people can understand what approach you're taking. And finally, at the very bottom, you have like all the notes that only the robots care about. And make it seem like I really hate robots. I'm sorry, Amazon.
So, if you've worked on a project long enough, you've probably seen a comment like this on your PR. And like Mark here, I believe that you should write tests before submitting up your pull request, because having good test coverage can turn a comment like that into a comment like this. So a while back, about a month ago, I sent a survey to my fellow coworkers asking if they wrote tests before submitting pull requests, and I got some interesting feedback. So if you see the first point here, it's about, oh, I'm really new to the code base, I don't really know sure what I'm doing, so I'm going to avoid writing tests until someone validates my approach. And I think this is totally understandable because you really don't want to commit yourself to writing some tests when everything is just going to change. However, the second point is something I totally agree with, and that is just waiting for general feedback before writing a test. Often, I think a good test suite helps establish context for the reviewer. So on top of a good title and description, especially from other teams and people who aren't familiar with your code, reviewers can truly start to understand your code. An interesting comment I saw was about large pull requests. So large pull requests with no tests are scary. It means there's a lot of uncertainty with that code and no real guarantee that it will do what it says it will do. If you back away from writing tests because you are in the midst of writing a large PR, maybe there's a bigger problem. So I encourage, this is another scenario I'm also sure everyone's run into. People put up a small pull request and they get tons of feedback. And then they put up a big pull request and it's like crickets. So large PRs require significant time investment from a reviewer as they have to comb through thousands of lines of code, trying to really understand what is going on, what gaps there are in your test coverage, and what possible errors might occur. So to avoid that issue, I encourage you to think about writing PRs from a different perspective. So instead of your usual routine where you come in, planning, working on the story, then putting up the pull request and then merging the pull request. Think about it a bit earlier. So, from the perspective of a product manager or the person who's actually proposing the feature, try getting involved here, because that way when it comes to the time where you're actually writing the individual stories that people are going to be making and coding, you have an idea of what pieces need to be done and how you can break those pieces up so that they're small maintainable pieces. Personally, I like to see less large PRs and smaller PRs, maybe hidden behind a feature flag. Also, think about QA. For them, it's so much easier to test a smaller PR than it is a large PR, and it's easier for you to get it across them. Also, when it goes to production, it's obvious that a smaller code change will be less riskier than a big change, most of the time. So to close off my point about large pull requests, I want to say try to avoid fixing lint errors when you're doing some important business logic. It's really easy for your important piece of code to get lost in a slew of indentation fixes. So if you're really keen and want to fix those white space errors, maybe do something like Anton did. I remember he put up this 20,000 line PR, and it was just basically indentations, new lines. And it was pretty easy to review, and it was pretty easy to ship. And remember, GitHub has this really cool trick where if you add the query param w=0, it actually shows you the diff minus all the white space. So when you add that w=0 tag to Anton's PR, it was actually 0 lines changed.
So one of the best lessons I've learned at FreshBooks is that for every PR you put up, read at least 3. Do you want your organization to be one where people only watch out for themselves, like this little dog over here? Or do you want it to be an organization where you all work together to achieve the best possible result? With that in mind, let's talk about giving feedback on pull requests. When reading a PR, you shouldn't think of yourself as the bouncer of the code. Think of yourself as yourself and the author as teammates working together in sync to achieve a common result.
So if there's one thing I want everyone to take away, it's that code review should be a priority. Code review is the cheapest place to find and prevent bugs before they hit production. No one wants to be here on a Friday afternoon trying to figure out why this piece of code doesn't work. So helping others find errors at this point will help everyone in the long run. I'd love to see a philosophy where in communities, instead of people going straight to coding, they're actually encouraged to review first, because code review is an extremely valuable skill. So if you're struggling to find time to review, there might be a few simple things you can do. I know Anton here, he has a routine when he comes in the mornings. Basically, he'll code review in the morning, then after lunch, and then before he goes home. So make it part of your routine. So just like checking your mail, and just like how Pinky the Brain try to take over the world every night. Also, try not to get lost in the slew of emails GitHub sends. I was so surprised how much people don't actually use GitHub notifications. So if you're new to code review and just want to get better at it, what I recommend you doing is picking one repository that you're comfortable with and then unsubscribing from everything else. That way, you use notifications, you get notified when anyone puts up a pull request or an issue, and then you can tackle it. So then once you start building up your skills, you can start subscribing to more repos and get better as a code reviewer. So notifications are an amazing tool, have helped me gather context of what everyone in my company is doing, and I personally love it.
So a common question I guess asked is, what sort of comments should I actually be making on pull requests? So you can make comments about, does the code follow code conventions? Conventions exist because it helps the code be easier to work with. It makes things easier to read and find. So ask yourself, are things like serializers, templates, and whatever in the right location? Is there a separation of concerns in the methods? Are the classes doing too much work? Are you using PHP style conventions and JavaScript files? You can also ask yourself, is the code clean? How well written is the code? Is it a pile of spaghetti? Is there anything that can be refactored? Would the name of methods and variables make sense to someone who's completely new to the code base? And how complicated is the logic? Can it be made even simpler?
So when reviewing code, try to think about the architecture. Is this code going to break any other parts of the app? What about shipping? Does it need to be shipped before its other piece of software needs to be shipped? I remember when me and Anton worked on the single monolithic service, we often broke mobile because it was a small repository off in the side that we just honestly didn't remember. So, lastly, also, when writing a database migration, always think about the case of rollbacks, because you never want your your data to be in a weird state and that you can't recover from. And think about your consumers. So you're making this fancy website, make sure that CSS class works on maybe IE 10. And also, what about people with accessibility concerns? Can a person parse your website using a screen reader? Remember that all images need an alt tag. So I know I'm guilty of this, and sometimes I would look at a pull request, really have nothing to say because it looks pretty good to me, and then I would just ignore it because I don't feel confident about saying it looks good. However, I really do encourage everyone to say something, because sometimes saying something can encourage other people to start collaborating. Because you never have to be afraid of being wrong, because you will be wrong. I remember there was this one time where Anton, he commented on this Python PR and offered a suggestion that only works in Rails. So we all had a really good laugh about it, and then he soon realized that yes, he was wrong. And you wouldn't believe how many times I have been wrong just for someone to come immediately after and be like, no, your suggestion didn't actually work.
So it can be difficult at times in the middle of a heated debate over, tab versus spaces, Vim or Emacs. But don't forget to be kind. I try to assume whoever's putting up a piece of code to review that they had the best intentions in mind, which really helps me kind of calm down and lower my defenses. In the open source world, it can actually get a bit hostile at times, which really discourages newbies and people of all sorts from kind of joining in and contributing properly. So we have to remember that if you want to have a collaborative community, you want everyone to grow. So please do not be like Lance Torvalds over here, who is known for being a jerk a lot of the times. Sorry. So another thing when you're giving feedback, try to ask and not tell. You want to kind of frame your feedback as questions as opposed to statements. Statements kind of insinuate, that you are right and the other person is wrong. Questions really allow the author to kind of like, sit back, reflect, and determine the answer for themselves. And finally, explain your requests. Not everyone knows, your reasoning behind everything. By explaining why something should be done, it really helps the author and everyone reading the PR kind of learn a little bit and grow a little bit more.
So we are all very passionate here, and it's so easy to gain tunnel vision. Just because you disagree with someone's approach on a pull request, don't blast them in their PR. I remember this one time someone put up this pull request and really didn't like it, and I was just about to go take a dump on their PR. But after stepping back, I just realized maybe, hey, in real life conversation might be better. So after talking to him, I actually realized there were technical decisions on why he was doing this, and I was pretty okay with it. So sometimes instead of going to town on that PR, an in real life conversation can be helpful.
So, if you want to put up your PR, and you know what? It wasn't that bad, right? You got a lot of constructive feedback, so what's next? Well, obviously there's code changes to be made, but I think it's important to actually remember to respond to everybody's feedback and get down to this.
So, always respond to feedback. If someone took the time to comment on your PR, you owe it to them to reply. Even if you don't necessarily agree with them, sometimes you can just have a good discussion about it.
And nothing's worse than spending a lot of time making comments on a PR and having the author reply to your comment like over a week later. What happens then is that you lose all context over why you made the comment in the first place. You have to reread the entire PR and learn everything that they're trying to do again. So respond quickly so that both the reviewer and the reviewee can get back to work quickly and merge the PR. And finally, do not be afraid to ask for clarification. Sometimes a comment is made, but you have no idea what they meant. I used to do this all the time. One of the best developers in the company would make a comment, and I'd have no idea what he meant. I didn't want to make it seem like I was a dumbass, so I'd spend an hour just Googling every single possible interpretation of what he meant. And it turns out he just misunderstood what I was doing. So if I just asked, and we both could just gone on our day, and we wouldn't have wasted so much time. So, in summary, when putting up your pull request, have a great title and description, have tests for use cases, and keep your pull requests small.
And when reviewing pull requests, try to make it a priority and even a routine. Also, remember, think about the architecture and think about the downstream dependencies. But most importantly, always be nice.
And when responding to feedback, always respond, do it quickly, and don't be afraid to ask any questions. With that in mind, does anyone have questions? Yes. you want to have everyone reviewing as many projects that are comfortable as you can, because not everyone can kind of fit the context of every project in their heads, right? As you grow, we're going to have even more repos, and no one has that much time. But by encouraging a community where people try to help pitch out as much as possible, it kind of helps spread the load a bit easier. Yes?
Question is a little bit related to that. So, as the person who is putting out the pull request, how do I know when I can merge my code? Do you guys have any conventions about like how many people should review my PR before I merge it to master?
So like, I think I don't know. So we do like try to wait for some people to give an acknowledgement of saying, hey, this looks good to merge. There will be times where you're like, no one really giving you that, but you think your code is good to go. I think it's really, you own your code, so you have to be comfortable in the case it doesn't work. So if you do want to merge it, no one's gonna really be upset with you, but you must follow it through all the way to production. So yeah, there's no real guideline of when to ship, when to do.
Because for example, in points we were running into that issue like, okay, when am I confident that my code is good to go? So what we did is that we established this concept of mandatory reviewers. So basically anyone can review the code, but I need at least 2 people, which are the mandatory reviewers, which are maybe the 2 persons that have the more experience in that particular piece of code. So they will have to review the code and give me the good to go before I merge it.
We have a feature kind of similar to that. We have no mandatory reviewers, but then whenever someone puts up a piece of code, we actually have robots running in the background that looks at the file and see, who's touched it the most in the past, and then they would actually pay those people to kind of take a look. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Like Anand said, usually the onus is on us to kind of make sure our code is legit. Like sometimes I just YOLO merge it because I think it's like a white space change. It's fine, right?
And if you're interested about that tool, I think it's actually Facebook's mention bot. So yeah, it's actually pretty useful. Yeah.
That was my question. I was going to plant it for you.
You got any questions on it?
Yeah, so on my team, we recently started using ProQuest 2, and one feature, like we're using GitHub for it, and one feature that I really liked about it was required status checks. So you can actually run like tests, like kind of sanity tests, like ESLint and stuff like that before to have it in before anyone reviews it, just in case there are issues that they might have missed. So what's your experience been with that? And have you got? It looked like you guys did that too with the check marks and the
Yeah, so I think like where me and Anton work at FreshBooks, when you put up a ProQuest, there's actually a suite of tests that will run against it, and it is actually pretty like mandatory in a sense to like make sure your test pass because nobody wants to deal with a broken build. So yeah, we do have that, and I think it's very useful. I've seen a lot of open source projects too.
Yeah, we have.
And we also have this really cool feature where we put up a PR and then the robots actually build an environment based on those changes. So for example, we have this front-end application. It builds the front end with your changes with whatever's in production right now in our background apps. And then QA can actually go on and test that specific version and give the thumbs up before we actually merge it in.
That's really cool.
I saw another question.
How many hours a week do you guys recommend spending for a developer on just reviewing code?
It's a tough question because as
Basically, prioritization, like.
So I tend to I tend to spend as much time as I can when I'm not actively coding. So usually when I finish my code and then putting up for a pull request, waiting for some test to pass, I'll use that spare time to like look at code. So I do spend personally a lot of time on it, but I think really just spending even just an hour a day can go so far in helping everyone. Because remember, we don't want to just because like you don't know what to say, you don't want to you want to unblock everyone. Like you don't want to be that blocking person. That person like, oh, I'm waiting for feedback. So
Yeah, same here with me. Like I kind of made it a habit whenever I get bored, I just jump on the computer and like see whatever PRs I can look at, which turned out to be a bad idea because like I was getting married and I was on vacation and then I was commenting PRs and I was like, what are you doing, man? Go get married. So do not be like me. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you very much for listening.